This is your weekly investigation into all things legal. This is Law and Disorder on the Dean Obeidallah Show.
And welcome back, Dean Obeidallah Show. Tuesday, March 12th. It's time for Law and Disorder. And we are joined by the one, the only MSNBC legal analyst, the man himself, Danny Cevallos. Danny, how are you?
I'm great. I just got back from a college tour where I learned that my dad, in fact, paid with a sweaty bag of cash, which I know you're familiar with,
right,
for me to get into college. It's very disappointing, Dean.
You know what I'm disappointed at? That when I look at the colleges that they were cheating to get in, none of them were my college. Like, no one tried to cheat their way into Fordham University.
That's,
so really sad.
That's right.
I wanted at least somebody to go like, I so want to get into Fordham. And sadly, Trump went to Fordham his first 2 years before he transferred over to
I always knew you two had something in common. Now, the thing that amazes me, and I know we're jumping right into this college scandal, Dean, is
Aunt Becky. Stop. It was shocking, Aunt Becky. I blame John Stamos. He has to be the ringleader, no?
You think he's the ringleader of the college?
Him and Bob Saget.
I think that's a possibility. I think they're definitely, somebody should be looking at them very closely. But the amazing thing is that this is one of those rare cases that brings everybody together because it combines all kinds of social issues, the rising cost of college, the obsession with getting into college, what would people do? It's got some celebrities thrown in for good measure.
Got that.
It's exciting, and the stories are so Keystone Cops. It's amazing. Go ahead, Dean.
Let's bring people up because people work and they don't follow everything. Just Desperate Housewives star Felicity Huffman is one of the defendants. She was really desperate to get her child into school. Folks, I'll be here all week.
Oh my God.
Tim Deutscher says, "I've been Dean Obeidallah. You've been great." I tweeted that for the exact thing. And then you've got Aunt Becky, and her Aunt Becky. Laura, what's her name?
You're asking me?
I have it in front of me, but
I could tell you who the voices were of the Transformers cartoon, but these people, I'm not familiar with their shows.
Yeah, Aunt Becky's name. Laura Laughlin paid $500,000, which begs the question, how dumb were her kids?
No, it begs a bigger
question. That's ridiculous.
question.
Like, Felicity Huffman paid $15,000. You could actually legitimately play a college coach, some high-level coach, $15,000. That's what Felicity Huffman paid.
There are so many things to unpack. First of all, if you really are that concerned for your child's future and they're kind of dopey when it comes to getting into college and you're willing to pay $500,000, give them $500,000. Put it in a trust. Let it earn interest. Don't engage in illegal activity to get them into a college that they may not even be able to perform at, because that's what's likely to happen. If you get your kid into Stanford and they're pulling straight D's in high school, they're going to wash out after a year. It's just an astounding and the level of obviousness and ease of capture. When you read the indictment, you see all these different fraying of the yarn as they were gradually being caught. It's amazing. Let's
play a little bit of the U.S. Attorney so people know exactly what went on. But just in sum, the Justice Department today charged 50 people, including parents, with running a bribery scheme to get privileged children with lackluster grades, as the reporting says, into big-name colleges and universities. And the ringleader was a man named William Singer. And people involved who were famous were like Felicity Huffman, who you might know from Desperate Housewives. And she got an Oscar nomination, I think, for Transamerica years ago. And then from Full House, they paid $500,000 according to this. Let's play. Here's clip number 1, the U.S. Attorney today. Clip number 3.
We're here today to announce charges in the largest college admissions scam ever prosecuted by the Department of Justice. We've charged 50 people nationwide with participating in a conspiracy that involved, first, cheating on college entrance exams, meaning the SAT and the ACT, and second, securing admission to elite colleges by bribing coaches at those schools to accept certain students under false pretenses.
Any doubt Donald Trump had someone take his SAT for him? Should we just start there? Because this is the political show. We usually don't talk, but I'm intersecting this. I'm trying to.
Of course.
Felicity Huffman is in jail and Donald Trump walks free.
The big question is,
what country do we live in?
Did this company exist when Donald Trump went to UPenn, when he went to Wharton? That's the real question, right? How did he get in?
Tell people a little bit about the case, though.
Yeah, a little bit. It's so hard to tell people a little about the case because the overall conspiracy and criminal activity involves so many different schemes.
It does.
The The first one is probably the easiest to imagine, but really just deviously clever when you think about it. This company allegedly figured out that if the child alleged that they had or had some evidence that they had a disability such that they could take the ACT or SAT over several days. Now, most people are aware of that. If you have some kind of disability, you can qualify to take it over several days. But what nobody probably anticipated is that they had a couple insiders who were the proctors, the people who watched them take the test at these other locations. And apparently they would do all kinds of different things, including having someone else take the test, maybe even monkey with the test scores themselves after the child takes it. But then one of the other schemes that just blew me away was this process of getting to coaches at Division I elite schools, paying them off.
Sports coaches, by the way, not to confuse with college coaches. I was saying that help people get into college. These are actually formal colleges, USC and other colleges.
Right. College sports coaches who, and the way it would go down, as I understand it, is that they weren't giving them scholarships, but they would be admitted preferentially as athletes. And then once in, I guess as far as the college was concerned, they just decided not to play the sport or whatever the case may be.
Right.
But of course, ghosts would linger on this transcript, and on at least one occasion, an advisor said, "Hey, I see you're on the track and field team," and one of the kids allegedly said, "Not that I know of. I'm not on the track and field team." I mean, it's amazing. Yeah, it's astounding.
I think of that conversation, though, you have with your kid. Like, you sit down to your kid, you are the smartest. You are so bright. You are brilliant. We're going to have someone else take the SAT for you. Like that. How do you have that conversation? How do you not tell your kid that, does the kid know they're not that bright? Is that what's going on? And they're like, but they're bright enough to know that going to a good college helps them. They're not bright enough to take the SAT well, but they're bright enough to know that if I went to Yale, it would help my life a lot, which is very true. If you go to an Ivy League school, I've learned later in life how much that can help you through all of life, to be quite frank. You've
answered your own question, because you can draw an inference from this indictment that for the kids who maybe were a little dopier, they may have not been aware that this was going on and ignored all the obvious signs. So in other words, if your kid isn't good enough to do well at standardized testing, well, then he or she also isn't bright enough to figure out that you're running a scam using them. So maybe that plays into it. And of course, a lot of these kids were innocent, but
if you gave $500,000 is what Lori Loughlin and her husband allegedly paid to this coach. If you gave Ford in my school $500,000, you'd get a wing named after you, and your kid gets to go.
Easily.
And the children, anyone in the family can go.
Easily.
Maybe not. Maybe I'm slightly, but I'm saying $500,000 donation, not to Yale, maybe to Yale, but to the other schools, probably get you into some of the schools on this list.
It would definitely get you considered. And
where did you go? You were homeschooled, right?
I was. Yes, I did.
Did you?
Yes. No, I went to the University of Michigan for college.
Oh, that's a good school.
And I went to Notre Dame for law school.
Well, that's right, I remember.
But the crazy thing to me, too, is that this happened with schools all over the board. I mean, everything. Yale didn't surprise me in the sense that for aspirational reasons, people want to go to Yale.
Sure.
But there were state schools on there. There were schools like Wake Forest, which, again, are all fine schools. But it was amazing, the breadth, the geographic scope of this conspiracy. It was at colleges everywhere, and it just was so, in some ways, so elaborate, so planned, but yet in other ways so Keystone Cops, so amateur. I mean, you have to believe anytime, the rule of thumb is the larger the conspiracy, the more people that talk and give it away. And that, if you add to that you're talking about 17 and 18-year-old children, anything that they know, they're not going to know to keep quiet. Or, I mean, the perfect example is the kid on the track team whose parents said, not the track team. There was another kid apparently who was 5'5", and his parents or somebody changed his profile allegedly to read 6'1" so he could apply to USC on a basketball scholarship. It's not like we're talking about crew at East Ham Sandwich University. Right. Basketball at USC is no joke. I mean, that's somebody that's going to get noticed.
I got rejected from East Ham University, by the way. Here is more from the U.S. Attorney today on the parents and how he was. It's funny. It almost seemed from the clips I saw, he was upset with the privilege factor involved with wealthy parents. And the real bad guy is William Singer, a well-connected college admissions advisor and the central figure of this scheme. But listen to the U.S. Attorney talk about parents. Here's clip number 4.
Today we have charged 33 parents nationwide with hiring Singer's Group to defraud testing companies and/or various universities. These parents are a catalog of wealth and privilege. They include, for example, CEOs of private and public companies, successful securities and real estate investors, 2 well-known actresses, a famous fashion designer, and the co-chairman of a global law firm. Based on the charges unsealed today, all of them knowingly conspired with Singer and others to help their children either cheat on the SAT or ACT and/or buy their children's admission to elite schools through fraud. Singer's clients paid him anywhere between $100,000 and $6.5 million for this service.
6.5. How your kid's an idiot. 6.5 million. You can pay that to anyone. I wish he would have said 2 actors, including Aunt Becky from Full House. Like, he just went through the list of characters. You may have known, Laura Loughlin from Aunt Becky from Full House. I went through the list and had a picture with her, with John Stamos and Bob Saget, the whole thing lined up there. Did you ever watch Full House?
Maybe
you
once or twice.
You weren't allowed to watch TV until you were 18, right? I'm getting a sense that you were very...
Oh, no, quite the opposite. I wasn't raised on TV. I was raised by TV. And, really my zone was mostly the MASH reruns, Laverne and Shirley, Happy Days, all that stuff. And you were too, Dean.
None of them implicated.
Don't talk about Full House like you ever watched Full House. You and I were watching Hogan's Heroes and McHale's Navy.
I didn't watch McHale's.
When they were rocking reruns. You watched them when you were home all day playing sick from school. That's when those shows were on.
That's what I did. I was Ferris Bueller's Day Off every
that's
day.
Right.
So you've got a lot of ire towards the parents. There is on
yes, I have
Twitter,
a lot of ire towards my parents. Oh, you mean
these parents?
Okay.
On Twitter, a lot of white privilege, white entitlement going on here. These are wealthy families. By what I saw with Felicity Huffman, the actress, that she's accused of paying $15,000 disguised as a charitable donation to Key World Foundation.
Right.
So what they're doing is not just, you can pay a college coach to help your child. Of course you can do that. But what they were doing is even circumventing the tax laws. I mean, this is really problematic for her. Her husband's William H. Macy. He's a great actor. She's a great actress. Her husband, everyone probably knows from Shameless and Fargo. That's her husband.
Oh, yeah.
So, and he wasn't charged at all. Was she doing her rogue operation there?
That's the amazing thing. That means that they, even within the marriage, they only had evidence. And there were a ton of Title III wiretaps. I mean, when you read the charging papers here, it is really clear this was going on for a long time, and they had a lot of wiretap evidence. And that means, amazingly enough, that they must not have had anything on Macy. I mean, that's the only thing I can guess, unless there's going to be a superseding indictment. But that is pretty astounding. I mean, the breadth of this investigation is just staggering. And like I said, so complex, so many rules violated, and yet so brazen that it was inevitable that they were going to get caught. And you can just see that from the indictment, as there were several cracks in the armor, as different areas, different schools were figuring it out little by little.
Trump called it a hashtag witch hunt. He called it witch, but he misspelled witch hunt because he didn't actually finish school. And here's the last thing. This, to me, is the stunning part. That except for, I think, USC, there was really no schools involved in this. USC is saying they're doing an investigation. Here is clip number 5 of the U.S. Attorney today.
Right now, the schools themselves are not targets of this investigation. As you can see from the charges we brought, the investigation was very broad. We've charged a lot of people. Throughout the investigation and our investigation of each of these targets, we have not seen the schools as co-conspirators with this activity.
Now, according to court documents, a former head coach of Yale's women's soccer team pleaded guilty a year ago and sort of became the cooperating witness. She was the Michael Cohen of this entire thing here. It seems, do you buy that schools didn't know what was going on?
I think it's funny that they say the schools are not the targets. Well, who is the school? I mean, if official employees of the school were involved, then in a sense the school was involved. It had the imprimatur of official action if a coach was doing stuff. So you have to wonder how many people knew about it. I'll give you an example. I saw email in the charging documents back and forth where some administrator appeared to be following up with the coach, and the coach was saying back, yeah, oh, you're wondering why this guy was brought in on a water polo admission, and his high school didn't even have water polo. Well, he apparently traveled internationally and competed with a club team. And, I mean, to the extent that email or whoever it was conducting an investigation, did their duty end there by just asking and getting an answer? I don't know. I mean, maybe. It depends on what that person's job was. But, for this to happen, it couldn't have just been one person at each school. That person has a support group, and there's files and paper kept. And I just can't imagine that in a vacuum that you'd be able to get a prospective athlete in without dealing with committees and paperwork and all kinds of other stuff. I'm just really surprised that the U.S. attorney would say something like, the schools are not really targets. Well, yeah, maybe not the mascot or whatever you think of as the school, but certainly some folks at the school are being looked at, right?
So we'll see how this plays out. I think the big thing, the only question I had that could apply to other people is that if you're out there and your kids, if you're going to hire some coach to help your kids get into school, at what point do you have criminal liability if that coach is doing something illegal? Like if you don't know about it and there's a coach out there doing all this scam things, he's got a great return on investment. Like he gets 70% of his people into Ivy League or the top tier schools.
If you have it's not really whether they know. It's more the lower standard. Do they have reason to know? In other words, were they willfully blinded? They stick their head in the sand when in the face of obvious clues, and that would go to a factual analysis. I mean, if you drop your kid off and then you go work at the major law firm, and your kid is just at this facility for 3 hours a day studying for the SAT or the ACT, and he comes back, and then you drive him to the test, and lo and behold, he did better, then I don't think parents are required to sit in on every class their child takes. They can't possibly do that. So I think there is some plausible deniability, and I'm certain there had to be some parents who either said no or maybe used their services to a much lesser extent, maybe not thousands of dollars, but maybe several $100s for some kind of assistance.
Someone paid $6 million.
I don't.
That's ridiculous.
I'm astounded. My parents never even discussed college with me, let alone considered me going anywhere. So it's amazing to think that with means, even that these people of means are willing to spend an amount of money that exceeds not only 4 years of tuition, but the amount of seed money it would take just to take care of that child for the rest of their life. If they're that much of a screw up, then, it's time for a spendthrift trust, probably.
If I could have got someone to take the SAT for me, I would have done that. That would have been helpful. I didn't do great.
We grew up in a time where there wasn't so much digital evidence.
We grew up in a time.
We grew up in an era.
I didn't know you.
We grew up in the Stand By Me era, where, not the movie, the actual, where the setting of the movie.
I did grow up during that time. I watched that movie in the theaters.
Listen, here's the thing. I still don't think that any reasonable parent, and I think that's why these folks are indicted, I don't think any reasonable person, and a lot of us wanted to go to college or wanted to go to a certain college we didn't get into, I don't think anybody, kid or parent, knowing the risk would reasonably do something to the degree that's alleged in these indictments. I mean, fake photographs of water polo players, I mean, that just seems crazy. Just bananas.
On the screen behind Danny right now.
Pole vaulters.
It's literally, folks, if you've seen the pictures, it makes me laugh. It's literally the kid's face put over some pole vaulter or water polo person. It's not even their kid.
Right.
And they would send in, do the colleges not have this thing called Google? I mean, what is going on?
I have a theory. And here it is. When I was in law school, I remember I happened in I was an undergrad, and I happened in on a law school admissions office, and I saw they just had secretaries or whoever in the office just going through applications. It was a very sophisticated process of just, redlining what they thought was interesting. The bottom line is, and I know this will come out, I'm sure of it, that we'll learn that what most people have known for a long time, that this whole college admissions thing is really not regulated at all. And I guarantee, or I'm willing to bet, that when these folks came up with this enterprise, this alleged enterprise, their rationale was, look, there's no crime because this isn't regulated. It doesn't matter. If it doesn't matter what I put on a resume. I mean, all right, so maybe later on they find out and the kid gets in trouble. It's not my problem. At this stage, who cares? It's anything goes to get into college. What they didn't realize is that by even submitting that in the mail or electronically, all of that became a form of mail fraud or wire fraud.
Man, this is... I didn't get my first choice in college. Now you bring that back up. It's a dark time in my life. I really had dreams of something else. And, what have I gotten at college? Maybe I would have turned into a conservative because I would have went to an Ivy League school, perhaps. No, they're more.
You went to a Catholic school. Those tend to be conservative. I went to a Catholic school, and it was quite conservative.
I went to Fordham and Fordham. Double ram.
You double Catholic.
Double ram.
That's right.
Well, they're the Jesuits. They're good Catholics.
They are.
There are a lot of good Catholics, but the Jesuits are really good because they're about social justice.
Well,
that's why Trump was driven out after 2 years. I'm sure he didn't like the idea of actually talking about caring for other people. That's why Fordham doesn't. I'm not even kidding when I say I don't think Fordham's ever had anyone who went to the school who became president. Now, he didn't graduate from Fordham, but the fact Fordham does not brag about it or talk about it in any way, they're embarrassed by him. And because the school teaches you about helping people, social justice, the Jesuits are really big into that kind of stuff. He's the opposite. I mean, they're about missionary work and helping people, not just converting people, actually going out and helping people. So that's why they don't talk about it. But all right, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll find out how much my parents paid to get me to Fordham and whatever else is going on. And we'll play. No, we're not going to play a clip of Laura Laughlin's daughter, which is going viral on Twitter, where she says, I'm not kidding, if you didn't see the clip, Laura Laughlin, who paid $500,000 for a kid to go to college, there's a clip on Twitter where she goes, I'm going to Fiji, and I really like partying. I'm not really into school. She really says that on the clip. And she's getting, like, your parents invested in this? So all right, let's take a break and come right back after this.
The Dean Obeidallah Show.
Whoever's the next president, we should call them the 45th president of the United States. And this will go down as a dark time in America that we'll never refer to again.
SiriusXM Progress. Back to the Dean Obeidallah Show on SiriusXM Progress.
And welcome back, Dean Obeidallah Show. We're live right here, Tuesday, March 12th, here with Danny Cevallos, and neither of us have been indicted yet, which is really kind of good. So Paul Manafort back in court tomorrow. Last week, everyone remembers, he was sentenced to only 47 months, even though the sentencing guideline was 19 to 25 years. I know you talked it probably to death on MSNBC, but what was your reaction to this? Was it as stunning as some people made it sound?
It was stunning. I predicted that he would get anywhere from 12 to 15 years. I really believed he would get a below guideline sentence, and he did. And my reasons for that are that statistically, the guidelines don't really represent actual empirical data. I mean, they're supposed to be based on that, but the reality is that most judges, I wouldn't say most, many judges will sentence below the guidelines because the guidelines can be very draconian. They can be very harsh, and any time with a white-collar case you have a high dollar amount of loss, that'll jack up your guidelines quickly. That being said, on the whole, white-collar criminals do get sentenced or have lower overall sentences than other crimes such as child pornography, not surprisingly, crimes of violence like kidnapping and murder, although murder is a relatively rare federal crime. So yes, I was surprised at 47 months, but here are the reasons why we shouldn't be that astounded. Yes, it's on the low end of all sentences given with a similarly situated defendant, but practically speaking, the judge had to consider the fact that Paul Manafort's life expectancy at most, according to the Social Security Administration, is 15 years. But for every year that somebody's incarcerated, they lose 2 years off their life expectancy.
My gosh. Interesting. I didn't know that.
So Paul Manafort's effective incarcerated lifespan is probably only about 5 years. That plus the data shows that, generally speaking, defendants 69 years of age or older routinely get sentenced to 5 years or less. That's across the board for all crimes.
Really interesting.
All crimes. And the reason for that is that the data shows that 69-year-olds, people of that age, are very unlikely to reoffend, to be recidivists.
So if I'm going to commit a crime, wait until I'm 69.
Exactly.
To 70. That's the time you do the least amount of penalty.
Exactly.
And it's probably like Shawshank Redemption. You're Morgan Freeman in prison. Everyone likes you. They call you Red. You get everyone's product. You get. Did you see Shawshank?
Who hasn't seen Shawshank? It's
I've
only
seen
on.
like 50
it's only on
times.
replay all day.
That wasn't a big hit in the theaters. It was a great movie. It's really remarkable.
Amazing movie.
Let's talk about Paul Manafort. He's going back to court tomorrow.
So now, yes,
he's been sentenced in D.C. for conspiracy against the U.S. and conspiracy to obstruct justice for attempting to tamper with a witness. He pled guilty to both charges in September. He's going before Judge Amy Berman Jackson. If her name sounds familiar, she's also the judge in the Roger Stone case. What do you expect? What could he get tomorrow, and what do you think we're going to get?
Totally different mathematical analysis. And a week ago or more, before the Eastern District of Virginia sentencing, Amy Berman Jackson and the District of Columbia were an afterthought to Paul Manafort and his attorneys. Why? Well, because everyone expected that Paul Manafort, even if he got my unbelievably low estimate of 15 years, then in all likelihood, when he rolled into Amy Berman Jackson's courtroom, she couldn't give him as much of a sentence, and therefore, if it ran concurrently, he essentially would be getting the District of Columbia sentence for free. It would just be subsumed. Everything changed when Paul Manafort got 47 months. Now, the sentencing analysis in the District of Columbia is totally flipped. Here's why. Paul Manafort comes into the District of Columbia now as a felon. He had no criminal history when he came into the Eastern District of Virginia. That adds 3 criminal history points. He's a criminal history category 2. That will jack up your guidelines. That plus the seriousness of the crimes jacked up the guidelines to the stratosphere. But this is one of those unusual cases. I shouldn't even say unusual. It happens sometimes. But sometimes the federal sentencing guidelines for a defendant are higher than the statutory maximum. In other words, Paul Manafort in District of Columbia has 2 counts, each worth 5 years. So you get to the maximum by adding up those 2 5-year counts, 10 years total. His maximum possible sentence is 120 months. That's 10 years. Now, I know we're getting very mathy, but here's all you need to know.
I should have brought a pen.
Is the guideline sentence is so high. When that happens, it's beyond 10 years. When that happens, the guidelines automatically becomes the maximum. So his guidelines tomorrow is 10 years.
The most he can get is 10 years tomorrow.
The most he can get and the recommended sentence are the same. They're 10 years. That is rare.
So really, it's recommended that he gets 10 years tomorrow.
I'll give you an example. Yes, it's recommended by the guidelines.
What if he gets 8 years tomorrow? Who makes the decision if the other 4 years, just about 4 years he got,
Right.
And these 8 years, if they're going to run concurrently at the same time, so it's overlaps, or consecutively where it ends up being a full 12 years, let's say.
Oftentimes, equally as important as the sentence meted out is whether it's consecutive or concurrent to another sentence. And you just described how they run. It can be the most important determination. Because Paul Manafort's conduct in both of these cases is what we call relevant conduct. It arose essentially from the same set of facts. That it's my opinion that Jackson should sentence concurrently. However, I believe she has the discretion to sentence consecutively, and that can be a massive sentence. It can be 10 years if she decides to max him out.
If she just gave him 4 years but did it consecutively, that's 8 years.
Exactly.
Even though he's getting 9 months time served, I believe, it's still 7 years. How much, say he's altogether gets 8 years, 4 and 4, how much time does he have to serve?
In the federal system, any sentence over a year is entitled to a 15% reduction for good time, which is all, just so folks out there know, that's why you often see a federal sentence of a year and a day as opposed to a year, because that qualifies you for that 15% reduction. So a year and a day is actually a lesser sentence than a year. But with a 15% reduction, I can't do the math that quickly, but that's about all you get in the federal system. The federal system has eliminated parole. There's none of this getting out early. Yeah, there's no more parole in the federal system.
So
it's been gone for a while.
Do your crime in state. That's the advice you're giving people.
If you're going to end up in criminal court, do whatever you can to be in state court every time and twice on Sundays.
Don't use the phone for anything. Don't interstate. Nothing interstate.
You do
carrier
not
pigeon. Nothing.
Want to be in federal court ever, 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 ever. As a rule of thumb, don't bring anyone with you that could be kidnapping, because that's federal. I mean, just don't rob a bank. You just stay out of federal court.
That was brought to you by Cevallos and Obidala, legal counsels at law.
Stay out.
I have another question. I read that when Paul Manafort pled guilty in September, it said here he also, in his plea, admitted that he committed several other uncharged crimes. And they talk about that specifically money laundering, tax fraud, illegal foreign lobbying. Now, he didn't plead to this. He, I guess, pleaded to the elements of these crimes.
Right.
If Donald Trump, is rumored, gives him a pardon a week from now, what happens? Can they go back to any of these that are state level, like tax fraud, and still then prosecute him there if they really wanted to?
So the state crime, remember, a federal pardon has no effect whatsoever on any state crimes. So the conduct to which Paul Manafort may have admitted to, because he did something that's a little unusual, because he got convicted and then before he went to trial in D.C., ran in and pleaded guilty and admitted to the conduct, if he admitted to uncharged conduct, I believe there's no jeopardy attached to anything that he was not charged with. So that's the general DOJ policy, and policy is not enforceable, is to charge all of the acts in one indictment, but obviously they can't always do that. So that's just a general policy. The reality is that Paul Manafort could probably be charged. There's no jeopardy attaching if he admitted to that conduct. And of course, if he admitted to it, it's pretty easy evidentiary evidence.
So they can grab a state prosecutor can find as evidence in the state that he committed these other crimes. And if they wanted to, because say they're pissed off that Donald Trump gave a pardon to
that's right,
a career criminal on some level. Frankly, he only got caught near the end, who's been involved in some bad stuff for many years. They could do that. It's their choice. Mueller would not be involved in that. It would take some district attorney, county prosecutor to go, I'm going forward on this.
Yes, but generally, to avoid a jeopardy challenge, they should, and I don't mean the TV show, I mean a challenge of double jeopardy. It's generally the state prosecutor is going to want to charge something that isn't exactly the same as what was charged in federal court. Even though those are separate sovereigns,
right?
It can leave itself open to challenge if they're not careful in the way they choose to charge.
All right, so let's take a break. When we come back, I want to get to Roger Stone a little bit because he'll get Thursday, but I want to touch on something. We've talked a lot about impeachment and being a political remedy, but the sense of, is there an obligation? Because you've written about it. You've looked at the Constitution. You've looked at, I think, some of the debate behind impeachment, and you were part of it.
Yes. I've been steeped in impeachment lore. Yeah.
So I want to get to the fact that the point of, Article 2, Section 4 of the Constitution talks about impeachment, removal of president. But is there an obligation in what you saw in the intent of the framers that if they have the evidence that shows on its face credibly that the president has committed high crimes or misdemeanors, should they not go forward, even knowing because of the politics of the day they can't remove him in the Senate? But are they not charged with the obligation? So we'll come back and discuss that with Danny Cevallos right after this break.
The Dean Obeidallah Show.
Voting is the most important civil right of our era because the right to vote preserves all other rights. It's not the Second Amendment. It's not guns. It's voting.
Sirius XM Progress. You're listening to the Dean Obeidallah Show, Sirius XM's Progress.
And welcome back, Dean Obeidallah Show. We're live right here. If I ever get arrested, the one phone call I will make is to Danny Cevallos, who will hang up on me quickly. But that's the person you want representing you. So, Danny, let's talk about Nancy Pelosi said, I'm not for impeachment, that I've been thinking about this. Impeachment is so divisive to the country that unless there's something so compelling and overwhelming and bipartisan, I don't think we should go down that path because it divides the country and he's just not worth it. So like, I'm just not that into you type of thing. She's like, you're a piece of garbage. I don't need to even worry about this stuff here. And my question, we had a discussion earlier, is that Article 2, Section 4 of the Constitution says the president shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. So clearly they must be removed, if they're convicted.
Exactly.
Anything did you read in the history of impeachment and the drafting of this that would indicate the framers intended, if there's evidence, credible evidence of any crimes, that you should have impeachment hearings?
No. And the only definition that we have, is the definition of impeachable offenses. And those are high crimes and misdemeanors. And we can look at the debates to get an idea of what those are. Here's what they are not. They are not felonies and misdemeanors. That distinction didn't even exist at the time. But what it is likely that it meant, and reasonable minds have disagreed on this, but that it meant abuse of official power. That's what a high crime or a misdemeanor was. So as paradoxical as it may seem, not all statutory crimes are impeachable, and not all impeachable offenses are themselves crimes. And each of those it sounds a little bit counterintuitive, but it makes sense. I mean, I don't think the framers, and if you look at their debates, I don't think they believed that the president, had he gotten in a bar fight that had nothing to do with his presidency, should be impeached. Now, again, reasonable minds can differ. At the same time, there are acts that are impeachable that are not necessarily crimes, and we know because one of the articles of impeachment against Richard Nixon was his abuse of power. Right. So we know that we know this definition of impeachable offenses, and then we're left with who's to define them. Well, the Constitution is clear. It's just up to the House to accuse. And what we're learning over the last few months is it's almost a wonderful thing because it's correcting a misconception about impeachment. And for many years, people have thought of impeachment as a criminal type trial or even a civil trial with a presiding judge. Right. In the case of the president, the Chief Justice. So it looks like a trial. It is anything but. It is only cosmetically like a trial. In the end, it is a purely political process, and Exhibit A to that is that your jury is hardly unbiased. They're the most biased jury you could ever find. They're the Senate. I mean, they are elected for their bias. So it's really nothing like a trial. It's ultimately, as President Ford, then not president yet Ford, said, impeachment is whatever the House says it is. Impeachable offenses are.
You know, Adam Schiff, the House Intel chair, said today, he echoed what Nancy Pelosi said, but he did say that there's enough evidence to indict Donald Trump, and if he was a private citizen, he would be indicted.
That's right. And I think Adam Schiff is right. Here's why. That we know that some crimes, not all crimes, are impeachable. And the framers recognized that impeachment would undo an entire national election, the only election that every American participates in on the same day. There's no other person that we elect. I mean, other than the vice president, because he or she is on the same ticket. But that's the only national election that we all participate in. So it was very serious to undo that. And that's why I tend to agree with Nancy Pelosi that if what President Trump has done so far is so bad, then the better remedy might be voting him out of office. And to some degree, many of these things we knew and we elected him anyway. If you look back to Andrew Jackson killed a man in a duel. It would have been strange to institute impeachment proceedings after he was elected for murder, for killing someone, because this is something that the electorate knew, that the constituency knew, and they elected him anyway. So it's hard to it's hard to disagree with Nancy Pelosi's view that the better approach may just be waiting till the next election.
You know, I had Lawrence Tribe on, as I call him Larry, because we're good friends now.
Boy, yeah, and he's a sharp character.
And he was talking about his book, which was the case for impeachment. But he made his big conclusion is, while I believe Trump should be impeached, I don't believe they should go forward if they can't remove him in the Senate. And he goes, the better remedy then is electorally through the election on November 3rd, 2020. So, and Lawrence Tribe, you know, in the big picture, and I don't subscribe at all to this view that, well, if we impeach him, then they're going to do that to our next president. They're going to do what they're going to do. They don't care about, there's no double standard to them. There's no, it's unfair because they did this or vice versa. We've seen it. I mean, they said no to everything President Obama wanted to do but spending money, and they said yes to Donald Trump running up the deficit to record numbers without any qualms whatsoever. Forever, the Republicans talked about free trade. Trump comes in, no free trade. Like, okay, I guess that's fine. You know, Obama does executive orders. He's a king. Trump does a national emergency, and they're voting, except for a handful, they're all voting for it. We're going to have a vote Thursday, it looks like, in the Senate, by the way. And if everything goes the way it's going to, Trump is going to get his first veto opportunity. So that doesn't factor in, they'll be unfair to the next Democrat. They were horrible to President Obama. They obstruct him in every way possible. And Fox News was horrific. So I don't care about that.
But the amazing thing is that there is presently articulable evidence of criminal activity, and yet the proof is in the pudding. If that were the standard, is there probable cause even to believe, because that's our criminal standard to accuse, our standard to convict is beyond a reasonable doubt. But if there's probable cause, more likely than not, 51% evidence that the president committed a crime, if that was your standard to indict, as it often is in criminal court, then the president would have already been impeached if that were the standard. But it's not. So this is a great teaching moment for our constituency about the Constitution, because it is not the same as a criminal standard for indictment. It truly is the will. And, although I don't like this statement, it's not normatively correct, but it's historically correct that it may be that an impeachable offense is, as Ford said, whatever the Congress says it is at that particular time.
Well, we're going to, when the Mueller report comes out, because even Nancy Pelosi, to be completely clear, folks, in her statements and says, unless there's something so compelling and overwhelming, and she added, and bipartisan, we're not going to go forward. But look, if you get something in the Mueller report, there might not be a choice. The Democrats might have to, if there's smoking gun stuff. We'll see how that plays out. And this whole reporting, the Mueller report, a few weeks ago, it's going to come out this week. Now, maybe he's winding it down. No one knows. Any sense at all from what you're seeing? I mean, where this might end? Do you think it would end before Roger Stone goes on trial? That's part of his work. I mean, how does this play out?
I'm one of those folks that tends to think it'll never end. There will be a Mueller report, but at the end of last year, when one source apparently said that Mueller's going to wrap it up by the end of February, I felt like I was one of only of a few voices screaming that there's no reason to believe that other than this unnamed source, because what you need to know about the federal government is that they take their time. They do not rush anything. They don't have deadlines. And if you try to impose a deadline on them, they're probably going to say, go pound sand. They don't care. They run their investigation the way they want to run their investigation. And every time they arrest a Roger Stone, that's a new treasure trove of information that could potentially open up a whole new avenue of the investigation. So it just seems, maybe I'm out of my mind, but it seems, maybe. Well, that's a separate issue.
Right. It doesn't have to be one or the same.
No, right. Mutually exclusive.
Sure.
However, the idea that they're constantly uncovering all this new evidence and that they're wrapping it up, it just doesn't seem right to me.
I think what's remarkable to all of us, incredible, is that we don't know what Mueller's doing right now. Like, what is going on?
Right. It's one of the great fairy tales of our time.
No, but it's going on. What is he looking at?
Right.
Like,
what does he do?
We were surprised. Right. Does he go to work every day?
What's work look like?
He hasn't tweeted at all. But no, in all seriousness, he's working on something. He's got a whole team working on something right now. They have evidence to show they need to do more investigations. Where is that leading to them to?
Do they have a cork board with everyone's picture and push pins and yarn going from one to the other? They must. They have to have that, right?
I can only imagine. I mean, would you be surprised if Friday Donald Trump Jr. gets indicted? I mean, that's the world we live in now. Anything can happen. I mean,
does he have like a heavy-set investigator who calls the two rogue investigators into his office, and one plays by the rules and the other one's plays by his own book of rules? And you know what I'm talking about. You've seen that movie, right?
I see what you're talking about here.
Okay.
It's going to be, all I know is that we all want this to come to an end in a way, but part of me now at this point, like, let it hang over Trump's head right through Election Day. Maybe that's even better. Let him whine, witch hunt, like tonight, whining about witch hunt. Did you see what he whined tonight about New York Attorney General? Did I read this for you? This happened 6:30 tonight. He was so upset with what the AG in New York did with subpoena. He's whining on Twitter how unfair and it's a witch hunt, and he actually attacked the state of New York itself. This is why people are fleeing your state, because you suck. And here's his tweet right here. I'll read it and then we'll go to a break. He said, and this is the President of the United States, folks. New York State and its governor, Andrew Cuomo, are now proud members of the group of presidential harassers, all in quotes. No wonder people are fleeing the state in record numbers. The witch hunt continues. So this would be a clue you would give if you're on a $100,000 pyramid, and the category is, what do guilty people say? This would be exactly the idea. Of people are leaving New York because the AG of New York served a subpoena on Deutsche Bank. This is why people are leaving New York. Only in the brain of the king of stupid. Let's take a break. We'll be right back.
With that.
You're listening to the Dean Obeidallah Show, where we crush Trump's lies every single day.
On Sirius XM Progress 127.
The Dean Obeidallah Show on Sirius XM Progress 127.
And welcome back. We are here with Danny Cevallos. Danny, we can't start a whole new topic. Although Roger Stone's going to be in court again on Thursday about the gag rule. Maybe he gets problems because of his book. I'm not sure.
I wrote about this. He's going to willingly defy that gag order one after the other until he ends up in jail. He knows what he's doing. It's his only weapon is his voice. And if the judge gags him, he's got no defense.
How rare is it to have a gag order in a court case, by the way?
Very, very rare, because it runs smack dab into First Amendment concerns if you take away both the attorneys and the defendant's ability to speak.
So, Danny, we got like 45 seconds left. Anything you want to share?
With the remaining time, I would like to read from my own SATs some of the questions that I got wrong, and I want to see if anybody can.
Let me
So
start.
the recommended daily calcium intake for a 20-year-old is 1,000
Danny,
milligrams.
I just want to say a train leaves at 4 p.m. heading to New York. Another train leaves at 5:15. Folks, thanks for tuning in. It's been a great show, especially if Danny Cevallos is here because you were here. More importantly, tomorrow night, all new show. I'm on Twitter at Dean Obeidallah. Of course, Facebook.com/Dean of Radio. Drop me an email, dean@deanofradio.com, because I'm needy. I want to hear from you. Thanks, Danny, very much for being here. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Lauren. No thanks to Matt because he wasn't here, but thanks, Nikki, for filling in.